In part one of our report on this week's brewing budget battle, we examine the House Finance Committee's $11 billion proposal and the reaction of House Democrats upset at some proposed cuts. Hours after that public forum ended, the House Republican Caucus presented their alternative. No new taxes, less one-time money, and a 2.6% cut in state spending. Where Republican Neil Kirk chairs the Finance Committee, when Republicans had the majority, he took the lead in outlining the GOP proposal. The plan restores $83 million in school building aid cut by finance and avoids the capital gains and inheritance taxes approved by Democrats on the panel. Kirk says in order to balance the budget, state bureaucrats are going to have to start setting real priorities.
Every service that the state provides is essential to somebody. If you have a limited amount of money, as Commissioner Tumpus has done in Health and Human Services, you establish a list of priorities. And you start with the most important and fund that, and go down to your next most important and fund that. And when you run out of money, you draw a line. And that's how
Kirk calculates the Democratic tax increases and cuts to local aid would cost the average family of four $1,200 a year. He says now's a bad time to do that.
Down economy that we're trying to stimulate, does it make sense to impose an increased tax burden on the people who are already suffering, whether they're businesses or whether they're individuals? And the answer for us is no. That if tax increases are appropriate, and there have been times in the past when, because of necessity, everyone has agreed a tax increase was necessary, but those were good times. It's not that you have to be against taxes in principle because it takes taxes to run the government. We have them now. The question is it appropriate now to raise them? And our answer is no.
Former Republican Speaker Doug Scanlon thinks the efforts to get more money from New Hampshire's wealthiest citizens will drive them and their wallets out of state.
Money to start a lot of businesses, and they choose to live here because it's a great place to live. There hasn't been an inheritance tax, there hasn't been an income tax on capital gains or on income. They do pay a lot of interest and dividends tax. These people shall choose to change their state of residency. Many of them will, some already have. And that's why this is very poor tax policy.
Minority Leader Sherm Packard points out Democrats' reliance on federal stimulus money to balance the budget could actually make the problem worse in the very near future.
So that 2 years from now is where you're going to create a huge budget problem going into 2012, 2013 because of the fact that all this one-time money, which I think comes to about $500 million, somewhere in that vicinity, is not going to be there 2 years from now. And if we don't start addressing the problem now, God help us 2 years from now when we come to go to do the budget.
The Republican plan makes some specific cuts to some departments, but relies heavily on an across-the-board 13.5% cut to most agencies. Kirk understands critics who claim state departments will simply pass those costs along to cities and towns without trimming their own departments.
There's a remote possibility of that. For example, in the Department of Environmental Services, they balance their budget by simply defunding money that otherwise went to cities and towns. They didn't cut one position in their approach, and yet they saved lots of money in general fund dollars. That's because they said, well, we'll suspend grants to municipalities for the next 2 years. If that's the game that department play, then the answer to your question could be yes. But firm oversight by the governor, the Department of Administrative Services Commissioner will make sure that there is no downshifting, that these are truly reductions in services without increasing property taxes.
Says some agency heads provided the legislature with good information on how and why they're spending tax dollars. He says others haven't listed their priorities, so only an across-the-board cut can force fiscal discipline. Governor John Lynch hasn't come out for or against the new taxes in the Democrat plan, but Kirk is holding out hope that the governor can help preserve the New Hampshire advantage.
But the governor works in his own way, and perhaps one can hope that he's having discussions with senators to try to persuade them that the House position on both of those taxes is not good public policy. In general, for the state of New Hampshire, in terms of future growth and future jobs, but also, more especially in these times of recession, that you don't increase taxes in a recession. It's not. Washington's trying to stimulate the economy. New Hampshire, it would seem, is trying to destimulate the economy.
When all the differences between the competing plans are boiled down to the bottom line, the Republican budget cut state spending by 2.6% overall. The Democratic budget would add $265 million more. Both plans go before the full House on Wednesday, facing a Thursday deadline to get the $11 billion budget across to the Senate. For New Hampshire Watchdog, Grant Bosse reporting.